Hi, I'm Adrià Deyza, but everyone knows me as Adrià Deyza because my surname is really long and very difficult. I do what I call new Mediterranean tattooing. For me, the most difficult is actually learning to let go of wanting to commit fully to each project. Like knowing that I have a few of them going on, I think has been at the end of the day the secret sauce that allowed me to succeed at all of them, because I think I have tendency to be an overthinker, to put too much passion in too short of a time span into a project, and then I burn very quickly when things don't move at the speed that I need to, or when people cannot follow my pace. And I think until I didn't have my children and I learned, that things will forever remain undone, and that I have to be able to go to bed without having that sense of completion that anyway does not exist. It is the illusion of, if I just finish this, then I will feel complete, that keeps you chasing that dragon. But you never reach it, and it's okay, and it makes life chaotic, and you always have to keep things in the back of your head. I always hope that eventually, if I do just this one last thing, I'll be able to remove this burden of my head. But it never happens, and it's totally fine. And that's the beautiful mess that life is, and I've tried to apply the same to all the projects. So sure, if I would be able to have a big team working with me, I would be able to really have things running differently, and especially at different paces. But I learned to, just know that things will have to be done little by little, and that I will have to be okay with things not living maybe at their true potential.
So you reduce expectations to the essentials. You remove all some details that are not necessarily necessary to focus on the essential.
I think I used to be like a big planner, and I would always have contingency plan B, C, and D. And I think I don't have enough energy and time to think about all these scenarios in case things go wrong. And instead of planning so much, I've learned to always leave a little bit of energy to deal with the unexpected, because I think that was part of the problem, was the frustration that came with me making everything perfect, having taken into account scenario A, B, C, and D, and encountering with scenario Z because of human error or someone not sticking to the plan or not doing what they had to do. I was very frustrated with people around me not being able to stick to the plan. And you cannot live like that when you have toddlers. They will do, not only that they won't do what you need them to do, they will do always the unexpected. It was like, how is that even possible? How are you full of spaghetti if we just had rice for dinner? Where these spaghetti came from? So I kind of like warmed up to the idea of always having to deal with the unexpected. So now, I just take one problem at a time, save energy to deal with that problem with a good mood, and not, feeling like the universe is against me, and enjoying the process of things growing to be what they will be. I've been in enough projects, and I was so worried to see them grow and seeing them mature, that the good parts, the beginning parts, the ones where you don't yet know where it's going to go, kind of flew by in front of me. And now I'm very conscious of that with two kids. I'm making sure that I'm not in a rush for them to grow up and be able to be self-sufficient. I'm also making sure and I enjoy the part in which they're babies, and the everything is very exhausting but also very beautiful. And it's the same with projects. I'm trying to make sure that I don't get that I don't cut to the part in which my studio is one of the biggest ones in Berlin, and everyone wants to work in it. I'm also enjoying the first few years in which the team is very tight and we don't yet know where we're going, and not everything at the studio looks perfect, and we're still figuring out things.
You're building up it together.
Exactly. So I see it very much like that. I'm trying to enjoy as much as I can year 3 instead of being in a rush to reach year number 5.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I try to approach it. I try not to overwork. It's not that I'm not the type for like work hard, play hard type of guy. Like if you want to run as many things as I do, you'd better make 25-hour long days. Like no, you just need to surround yourself by really talented people, trust them a lot, invest in those relationships, let go of the things that you cannot control, and accept that when you're doing so many things, things will suffer, maybe not when it comes to their quality, but maybe the timings of it things will move slower, and they have to, and it has to be okay, so I'm trying to repeat that in front of the mirror every day.
That was the wisdom of the day.
Exactly.
How did you start tattooing?
So I started out of pure and sheer desperation, which I feel often is the best way to stumble upon it. I always, it's a classic story. Yesterday I was watching a documentary about Eclipse in Barcelona, and I was listening some of the owners talk about how they got inside. You could make like a deep fake and put my face. It's exactly the same story as El Carlo, El Rotor. It's just kid likes to draw, fascinated by pop culture, cartoons and stuff like that. Maybe that more gravitating towards art is gravitating more towards lowbrow things, if you will, more comic culture, and through music, starting to get very used to see tattooed people at a very young age, always fascinated by that. You start designing your friends' tattoos, that then they go to a shop, then your designs get compliments, then one day you swing by, you start having that interaction with the tattooer, you get a sense for the space, and you love it there, but you still have, or at least in my case, I had this idea that although I really appreciated that as a costumer, it was not meant for me. There was something not allowing me to identify with that culture, which many, many years later I learned what it was, but at the beginning it just seemed like I failed to understand that is where I belong, And I pursued my path as an illustrator, which eventually brought me to graphic design, which eventually brought me to advertisement, which eventually brought me to a burnout, which eventually brought me to Berlin, which brought me to downgrade myself again to a graphic designer and see if I can, make it here. Then to an illustrator, and after many years of not having drawn, when I was in Berlin struggling to figure out what it is that I'm going to do here without the language, without money, I remembered how drawing made me feel. And I pursued that for a hot minute. And as I was burning options and nothing seemed to be right, I was starting to have the idea that maybe Berlin was not right for me. Someone came again with the same suggestion that I had heard many times since I was 18. Hey, you know what? You should pick up tattooing. You would be great at it. And that one time, it resonated completely different. I was in Berlin. It was I don't know, almost 10 years later. Tattooing had evolved at a point that was unimaginable in Barcelona when I was growing up. It was also Berlin contemporary scene, 2-3 years into AKA, people like Valentin Heers and Peter Aurich blowing my mind, Martin Jan starting. It was all this scene that was super, super creative of the 2010s, 11s. Mm-hmm. And my brain went, wait a minute, maybe now that you don't have any other options, maybe here in such a creative city, maybe like this, approaching it as if it would be fine art, you could indeed be a tattooer. And
you did.
And I did. And it was like a lot of struggle, a lot of lack of information. I did not know exactly where to go. Thanks God, my friend Georg, who is, the one that made sure that every excuse that I had, he knocked it off. I was like, yeah, but, I don't know anything about hygiene. I'll show you. Yeah, but, I don't know how even these, coils machines work. Now we have pens. Forget about that. So he took it as his life mission to convince me to overcome my fear. So he took me in. I would drive every week from Berlin to Leipzig to tattoo at his private studio. He used to do photorealism, so I got trained in things that, were super complicated and that I had never in my life used. These like stencils made by hand with like 72 sections for 72 different shades of gray. And then we would go every Friday from Leipzig to Dresden, I think, to work at a studio that was opening by someone who may or may have not been linked to the Hells Angels. So that's the environment where I kind of grew up as a tattooer. And I think then is when I realized, I think I know what made me think that I don't belong in this world in the first place. And although I'm really convinced that this might be my path artistically and professionally, I still think that there would be many people like me that if they are not desperate enough, they would never set foot in a studio like this. So I started very soon to look at both sides of the fence and trying to figure out how to grow artistically and how to develop my language as a tattooer, but also how to change and improve the tattoo scene so they would be more welcoming for like weirdos, and not weirdos in the sense of, outcasts, rebels, people that come, from the world of like hardcore music and skateboarding. No, another type of weirdos that are like socially awkward and they don't know how to claim their space and they, don't deal good with tough love and they are introverts and whatnot. Also, these people could find themselves attracted to tattooing because I thought I could only think about the many years that I lost by not picking up my apprenticeship when I was 18 and doing it, when I was 26 instead. And yeah, that has always sat in the back of my mind and has always motivated me to be the one person in a shop that is very curious and very connected to the manager, understanding how shops work, how teams are built, and how you create certain energies in a shop, how furniture and the way you define the customer journey defines the first few minutes and how you feel entering a shop. So all these things, I've always been fascinated, and maybe because I was a little bit older when I got inside and because I was coming from a thriving career in advertising where I was already leading my teams and whatnot, I've always had, almost since my second shop, I've always had these mixed role of tattooer / manager of the shop. And eventually it led me to run the shop above a manager, meaning that before I was able to open my own studio, I got the opportunity to essentially play studio owner minus the risk, minus the financial risk and having all the responsibility. But I learned how to take care of a team, how to always keep an eye out for new talent, how to make sure that I could ensure a path of growth from someone who entered the shop maybe as an apprentice, and where do they go from here? And then they become a great artist, and what are we offering them after that, you know? So yeah, I think this is a little bit like my peculiar journey into tattooing, always having this unique ability of understanding shop owners, managers, apprentices that are struggling for information, because I can relate a lot to that, and also artists that are thriving and are busy, and they don't want to, you know, have to deal with the nonsense of a manager or a studio owner, because they have their own shit sandwich, and you know, that they have to deal with. Yeah.
And then you started Iragana, which is not a totally traditional shop.
No, I mean, I don't feel there's nothing revolutionary about it. But tattoo studios are a little bit anchored in the past, so it seems somewhat disruptive. But I think once people warm up to the way we work, they will look back, and when people try to sell me as a visionary, they'll go like, okay, I mean, it's pretty logic what the dude did, right? I think with historical perspective, it will be like a no-brainer. It will be even more difficult to understand how conditions for tattooers were before studios like mine and many others that I hope will follow. But yeah, essentially, I come from street shops where at times, depending on the event, you would split like 60-40 for the studio, so against the tattooer. And at the time, I was able to run my first studio, which I was not the owner of it, but I got to see a lot behind the curtains. It was somewhat standard to have the 30% percentage, and in the studio where I was working, we had the 40%. And nowadays, I think it sounds kind of crazy, but it was just slightly worse than the standard studio. It was not that bad. But with every year that passed by, it became more obvious that people were tired of this. The overhead was starting to get a little bit bigger for tattooers. The idea of promotion taken under the control of the artist, instead of having the classic model in which tattooers would just come in from a vendor on the weekend and ask the manager like, hey, what do I have today? And it would be the shop's responsibility to give you work. At that time, it was already crystal clear that the tattooers promote themselves, they manage their own bookings. At times, they even pay another person that takes care of their booking. So there were all these extra expenses and work. And the studio was essentially, I wouldn't say doing every time less and less, but they were just kind of making up unnecessary jobs to justify the percentage, if that makes any sense, right?
100%.
In strings accord. So I think as a reaction of that, we saw a lot of tattoo collectives appear, and it seemed very interesting to see what they were doing, and I was personally rooting for them, but I was also very. It became painfully obvious really, really fast that it had major problems. You would see tattoo collectives where people would end up splitting up because of having neglected their finances and accounting, because of like the person that was responsible for the cleaning is super dirty. The other one that is supposed to, fix the space and build things has not built something. And a lot of like really cool, talented tattooers that would usually come together, not based on like, oh, great, you're great with numbers, you're great with people, you're great with cleaning, but more like, hey, I love your style, I love your style. They had an artistic connection. They were forced to measure their value with things that had nothing to do with their tattooing. Mm-hmm. So I thought maybe the perfect model lay somewhere in between, and the only thing that I that I made is essentially a collective with management, I think you could call it. So it's essentially when no one wants to lose time taking decisions, I take control. And there's a lot of things that tattooers don't give a fuck about that I will just decide. If they have all of a sudden an interest on that, hey, what are we doing with the lighting situation? I will open the floor for debate. But from a financial standpoint, it operates like a non-profit in the sense that we just make ends meet. At the end of the month, we recover all the expenses. But those expenses include the budget for a manager, include the budget for a person that cleans, and a lot of things that I would never put on the shoulders of tattooers for the survival of the space. And this is not up for debate, is not up for a team meeting, because obviously it will always be very tempting to bring down the costs of the residency with the promise of, I think I can take care of that. Like, I know you can, but you should not. You should just focus on keeping up with the algorithms, making sure people like what you do, growing as an artist. You have enough on your fucking plate to be, on top of that concern about making 3 posts for the studio every week or do the cleaning 3 times a week and whatnot. So we came up with this model, and it had to have the perfect storm for it to work the way I wanted to, because the numbers kept on being too high. It was nowhere near close the rent that some of the residents in bigger studios were paying. But we opened in 2021, and there was this sense of euphoria that, like, now we're coming out of this shit situation and life is going to be right back to where we had it before. And I had this feeling that this is not going to be the comeback that people are hoping for. So I knew that we had to reach a number that would make people comfortable, with 3, 4, 5 years of things getting slowly shittier and shittier, that it would still give them the room of not panicking, because I cannot pay the rent at the studio, right? And that it needed to work in a way that also the people that are against rent will always tell you, like, yeah, you save a lot of money when you pay rent, but then you go on holidays or you go on guest spots and still pay the rent and you're fucked. So I had to figure out ways of overcoming these problems that usually people that pay rent have. And once the monthly rent was low enough that I felt comfortable, I kept on having this idea of tattooers should be able to pay their monthly rent with 1 day of work, and then the rest should be for them. And we found the right space with the right size, with the right amount of beds in it, and the right amount of people that could share in a way that it would make them not fight for space, but kind of figure out on their own how they wanted to share the space, how many days they wanted to work. Everything kind of lined up in what now seems like a very strange business model. As my wife says, like, you cannot call it a business model if you don't make money. So it's actually like a running model. But yeah, I think going back to this idea of always overthinking everything, I do have the capacity to take something that people just think it can work in only one way because it's always been the way it's worked, and breaking it down, deconstructing it, dissecting it, and putting it together in a completely different way. But there was too much overthinking in other areas of the studio that are not relevant. I always fantasized about the curatorial approach of the styles that I would put together, or how the costumer experience would be walking in. And I've realized that all this is irrelevant. at the end of the day, I saw it crystal clear. I'll be, whether I like it or not, because this is a completely different story, but I think at the time of opening the studio was probably the first time in my life that I actually did not want to open a studio. I just felt I had to do it. But I'm going to be, whether I like it or not, the owner of a tattoo studio. I have a little boy, another one on the way. They will probably have to hang around my studio after school. Who do I want them to be drawing next to? That's the criteria to enter the shop. Doesn't matter what's the style exactly that they do. They're following how big they are. Do you want your children to call them auntie and aunt? Then welcome to the team. Welcome to the family. And I've been in many studios where people throw around the word family in a very casual way, and it's more like a mafia family, that then they stab you in the back if you're against them, and you turn into a rat, or you're opening your possibilities, and they see you outgrowing them. They'll make sure that they murder you. This is family for real. Is the one in which no matter what you do, you're one of us. I'm gonna be happy for your progress, even if this means that we're too small for you and that you have to follow your path. So I try to keep these always in mind when figuring out what's the direction that I go, and this always takes the forefront of decision making. Not so much where do we want to be in relation to the other studios in Berlin, what's the aesthetic that I want to push and whatnot. I have other projects for that where I can put all these like brand building. I come from places where the brand and the studio was always put before the people working in it, and first of all is, in my opinion, unethical, and second of all is wrong. It's never the studios making tattooers, it's always the tattooers who make the studios. That's it. That's simple, and there's people that fail to see that, and I promise myself that I would never fail to do that.
Mic drop. How do you stay humble in this whole shark thing?
Because I'm covered in poop on a regular basis, and that humbles you.
Spaghettis or poop?
Like poop. No, it really, like every time you think you're a big shot, or every time that you are like too much in the work bubble, and people see you for your experience, the projects that you run, the fact that you inspire them to start working or whatever. I'll go home and no one cares there. Starting with my wife, she's absolutely unimpressed with it, and my kids don't care. Like I cannot come and go like, hey, sorry, I missed the play afternoon, but I made a sick back, and they go like, okay, good for you, dude. So it's very interesting to hop from one world to the other. It always gives you a crazy perspective that the things that I live as a tattooer, as a studio owner, as a curator of new folk are only a small part of my life. And I think it's this hopping back and forth that allows me to stay not humble, but grounded. Mm-hmm. And I think, like traveling and talking to people that are from places really, really far away, it gives you also a real authentic sense of how big or important the things that you're doing here are, which is not a lot. It is really important for a small group of people. I have the feeling that I've contributed to people who I worked with for 4, 5, 6 years, and that I could see them not be able to get that last gear on because they were always struggling to keep up with the studio and the percentage and the requirements that the studio has from them and whatnot. I've been able to provide them with an environment and working conditions that has allowed them to thrive, to finally, get in in a long-term relationship because they don't have to be every fucking weekend doing flash days or, taking last-minute appointments. They finally had the time to go and make German lessons. So I've seen a lot of people that felt a little bit like stagnated and chewed up by this machine that will continue to use you until, you either outgrow it and come out if you're lucky, and if not, you're just gonna wake up one day and realize that without the studio, you're nothing, right? Mm-hmm. And I think no one does that on purpose, but it's just the way tattoo studios have kept tattooers in check for forever. And it starts with a very appealing option of getting walk-ins. And I mean, everyone thinks like, oh, fuck walk-ins, especially nowadays. But that's probably because you're in the wrong studio. But if you're in the right studio where the walk-ins are within more or less the same sensibility, the aesthetic sensibility that you work, it is very tempting to just take them. There's also a new type of walk-ins which are like no preference requests. People writing an email the same way they would book an appointment with you. They just know they want any tattooer of your studio because they like the brand of the studio and they know that for the most part they are in line with the aesthetic of all tattooers at the studio. So there's a lot of clients from the studio that then the studio can decide who they give it to. So, if you are young and hungry and want to try things and get out of your comfort zone, you take a lot of those. And then you've been tattooing a full day and you arrive home, you don't want to start drawing flash. And that happens 1 week and another week and another week. And then next thing you know, it's been 6 months without new flash. And now you really depend on the studio's, customer clientele, like customer base for you to keep up at it. And then you have money. And when you go out, not only you don't draw flash, but you also, party, and you get like a sense of like the fun times and perks of being a tattooer, and you get to know a bunch of people, and you work with a lot of tourists that are in town only for a weekend, and we know that what that brings, right? So next thing you know, you it's like cut to 15 years later, and you're like a washed up tattooer who was like had a super bright future ahead of them, but just, partied a tiny bit too much, relied a little bit too much on the appointments that the studio would bring them, and they cannot keep up with the new times, right?
But studios are over. Like nowadays, you don't have that many walk-ins that
sure
to live that.
Sure, but just like the walk-in system was never designed to keep tattooers down, it just happened to be effective to keep them down. There's a lot of little decisions that come with the furniture, the fact that you do need a front desk person, which we don't have, or we don't need at all, but that helps a lot convincing tattooers that the overhead is necessary. Like, hey, we're all here paying for the salary of this person that needs to be sitting here without doing much a lot of the day, but just being able to greet people when they open the door. Just don't have an open address. Book only an appointment and get a big table to draw. I don't know. It's a lot of things that, like, you work in a studio, then you open your own and you just go to this mental bucket of things that you've always seen. Like, okay, I need a front desk, I need a, drawing room, I need a couch for some reason. So, and are all these things that are, it's just how studios have always been designed. And part of the reason why this continues is because it's proven to be a very effective system to keep, tattooers humble, loyal, knowing that without the shop they wouldn't be anything, etc., etc., etc. And even if you take that as a love letter to the past, when tattooers used to be loyal to their shops and whatnot, that is absolutely a distorted, romanticized vision of what tattoo studios used to be, because it kept on being essentially like hurt kind of trauma perpetuating cycle in which you come in as an apprentice, you grow. At a point, I try to keep you down because I see you outgrowing me. And the way this works is that then you'll have no room to grow only if you leave the shop, and then you'll open another shop. And because we both work with percentage, essentially you're going to be my competition, right? So people would have these families and then spread up, and I'm not talking to you anymore, right? So even this idea that the reason why studios change so much is because, you know, Gen Zs don't know how to go the long route to gain success, or they have like zero, you know, respect for more experienced and senior professionals, or because they are not impressed with whatever. Like they'll tell all these things. It's just the business model is unsustainable that tattoo studios had. It used to work when tattooers could keep the information under wraps and make sure that not a lot of people intrude their field. But when, you know, inevitably information got out there and people from all walks of life started working as tattooers, it was an unsustainable business model. So the way I see it, you have to see tattooers that work at your studio not as employees, but as partners. And they are my partners, and the clients of the studio are not the clients of the studio, are the clients of my partners. Is my partner happy? The client will be fucking happy.
It enhances the experience of a client coming to the shop, which is considered as a human person, not as a financial interaction.
Exactly, and I learned from AKA, like credit where is due. I come from a lineage of French-owned tattoo studios that put a lot of effort and love into the customer journey. People will walk in here, will sit in this beautiful couch, will offer them a tea, then they'll have magazines here and, you know, whatever portfolios there. And it's very much thought from the perspective of serving and entertaining the clients that walk in, and always neglecting a little bit the space, the lighting conditions, the freedom of movement of the tattooers there. Mm-hmm. And I had the pleasure of working a few months at AK between my last studio at Unicat and before opening Iragana. And he just showed me that for the most part, when you make a shop where the inmates run the asylum, you know, it's all like made by artists, and they're like playing their crazy music that is like disruptive for clients, and they're just being loud and joking around and being themselves. Clients love that. They're almost, they have this like fly on the wall perspective on what their favorite tattooers are. And sure, it's not very inviting. If you're sitting outside, you feel almost like you're out, they're in, and you're just able to see what is happening. But I could see that this whole idea of like me wanting to accommodate my clients and make them feel comfortable and whatnot, they're like just having as much fun, if not more, when they're just seeing all these crazy tattooers, you know, interact and be crazy amongst themselves. They love it. So that was the first thing that I went like, what? Here it goes, you know, like occupying a third of my shop for clients is over. They don't have a space. They have to sit with us at the table. They come in and they feel like they just crashed, you know, a Christmas dinner of an Italian family where you have the nonna going like, hey, sit here. And you go like, oh, here. And, you know, you have to sit between two people that are like talking, you know, in the middle of a consultation, someone else is drawing with the iPad, and that's where you sit, and you go like, isn't there another place where I can wait? Like, no, you wait here. You know, there's no division. There's no separation of like, you're stopped at the door and like, who are you? Where do you want to go? You know, and that comes with some requirements. The shop cannot be in a super busy street. It cannot be super visible from the outside, you know, so it does not work everywhere. But I just think tattoo shops are shops, and artists should not work in shops. They should work in studios, in ateliers, you know. And for as long as tattoo studios look like shops, there will be a discrepancy between the artistic, you know, freedom that the tattooers that work there have and the shop's well-being. This is a shop. You have to behave like this and that. This has a brand. This has a whatever. Your name is not your name. It's linked to the reputation of the studio. Like, I don't have a powerful brand that needs to be protected. Like, the brand is aseptic and neutral enough that everyone can transfer a little bit of them. It has a name that is something, but it's not much of this or that. It has like a logo that doesn't send you in one direction or the other one. Everything is designed in a way that is kind of incomplete, so that people that work there can fulfill the project's ethos, whatever.
Yeah, and develop themselves and grow and like without having any competition with the shop.
And help the shop also become more this or that,
Yeah, it's a
symbiotic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
it works.
Yeah. So that's more or less where I'm at, man.
Whoa. Do you have anything to add?
No, I mean, I think, the only important thing for me is like not coming across as if I would have the answers and the future of how all tattoo studios would need to look. I think there's a lot of different type of tattooers, and it's good that there's different type of shops for different type of tattooers. I think what I would love is that when you talk about a tattoo studio, you don't go anymore to one image that you have of what a tattoo studio is by default, right? So that at least you have 3 or 4 in mind, different concepts of tattoo studios, depending on the style, the type of tattooers who work in there. So what I'm hoping more than my concept to become the new mainstream is my concept to prove that there's no anymore like one mainstream concept of what tattooing is, that everyone can come in and go like, okay, it's always worked like this, but I'm going to make it different, right? What I do works really good for the type of people that live in Berlin, the type of artists that I have, but someone different might need like a different set of rules and approaching the thing from the ground up and not taking ideas just because they were always like this. And it always makes me laugh because to me, tattooing is like drawing, right? And I always imagine that someone goes like, so what does your boyfriend do? And you would say, oh, he draws. And like, oh, he draws. So I can kind of imagine what like clothes he's into, what type of music he listens, and where does he work. Like, no, you have to ask a shitload of questions to figure out, like, okay, he draws, but what the fuck does he draw? Is he an artist, or does he make comic books, or is he an architect? Is he an urban planner? So I think tattooing should be the same. You should not go like, oh, a tattooer, so I imagine like rock and roll and whatever. Then you have to ask a lot of questions like, oh, is he a tattooer and he makes the body while there's like, meditation drums in the background? Does he take tattooing as a healing practice? Or is he one of the, cool kids from the back kind? Is he a queer tattooer that, works only in like solid flash settings and that has like sliding scale prices? Or is it, someone that is into American tradition and maybe has a chopper in front of the shop? I think there's been too many studios claiming to be the future of tattooing, and like what comes before us does not count. From here on is what tattooing is gonna be. I'm fully aware that this will continue to happen, but if I could only kind of set the mood, is just there should be a shitload of different approaches to tattooing, to shops, and this only benefits all of us, And there's enough people getting tattooed for us not to have to eliminate one another to justify our existence, if that makes any sense.